The card reader beeped twice and the nurse looked at me with that tight, practiced smile people use when they already know your answer is no. "I'm sorry," she said softly. It declined again. Behind the double doors, my mother was being rushed into emergency surgery after a burst aneurysm. I could still hear the wheels of her bed rattling down the hall, could still hear her slurred voice trying to tell me not to cry. I had one job in that moment. Pay the deposit, sign the papers, keep moving. Instead, I stood there with my phone in one shaking hand and my dead card in the other, feeling like the floor had cracked open underneath me. I stepped away from the desk, unlocked my banking app and waited for the numbers to load. My checking account was almost empty. My savings. The savings I had been building for 6 years, the one I never touched unless something was truly life or death, was missing nearly everything. Not low. Not tight. Gone. I thought it had to be a glitch until I saw a linked account I had never seen before. Hidden below the accounts I knew, there it was, quietly attached to my profile like it had always belonged there. And what I saw next made my blood run cold. The account had a name I didn't recognize, but the transfers were worse. Rent payment. School tuition. Pediatric clinic. Grocery delivery. Salon appointment. Furniture store. Every week, sometimes every few days, money had been moved out of my savings and into that account, then spent on things that had nothing to do with me, my mother, or our home. At the bottom of the latest transaction was a note field, just 6 words long. For Claire and Nora this month. I read it once. Then again. Then one more time because my brain refused to understand what my eyes already had. My husband's name was listed as the primary user. But that wasn't the worst part. I called Daniel right there in the hospital corridor with fluorescent lights buzzing above me and a woman in the waiting room crying into her hands. He answered on the 4th ring, breathless, irritated, like I had interrupted something important. "I'm in the middle of a meeting," he said. "What is it?" "My card was declined," I said. I barely recognized my own voice. "Our savings is gone." He was quiet for half a second too long. "What are you talking about?" "There's another account, Daniel." Another silence. Then he laughed, light and dismissive. "Maya, not now. If you're panicking, you're probably reading something wrong." I stared at the screen. "Who are Claire and Nora?" This time he didn't laugh. He ended the call. I wish I could tell you I knew right then that my marriage was over. I didn't. When your life is built around loving someone, your mind does cruel things to protect itself. It looks for explanations that hurt less. Identity theft. Clerical error. Business account. Some kind of temporary transfer I didn't know about. Anything but the truth standing there in plain sight. My name is Maya Torres, and for most of my life I was the kind of woman people called strong because they didn't see how tired I was. I was 34, working remote billing shifts for a physical therapy network by day and helping care for my mother at night after her first stroke. My father had died 7 years earlier in a construction accident, and the small settlement from that case had become the emergency cushion I guarded like air. I didn't buy expensive things. I didn't take girls' trips. I clipped coupons, packed lunches, bought store-brand cereal, and told myself sacrifice was temporary. Daniel used to kiss my forehead and say, "One day all this discipline is going to give us a beautiful life." I believed him because belief was easier than doubt. When I met Daniel, he knew exactly how to make himself feel safe. He listened when other men performed. He remembered details. He called my mother Ma Elena before we were even engaged. He said he admired that I carried so much without becoming bitter. After my father died, he was the one who stayed up with me when I couldn't sleep. He was the one who held my face and told me grief didn't make me hard to love. By the time we married, I had confused comfort with character. That mistake cost me almost everything. The first few years were ordinary in the way damaged things often are before they split open. We rented a narrow little house with creaky floors and a fig tree in the yard. We made coffee at home. We argued over paint colors. We tried for a baby. We lost one at 10 weeks, then another before I had even heard the heartbeat. The second miscarriage took something out of me that never fully grew back. After that, I counted time by doctor visits and blood work and the way people's faces changed when they asked if we had kids. Daniel changed too, but softly in ways that were easy to excuse. He started keeping his phone face down. He took work calls outside, even in the rain. He said his consulting business was under pressure, that clients were late paying, that we needed to tighten up for a while. When I suggested another fertility cycle, he sat at the kitchen table, took my hands and said, I want that too, but I can't let us drown trying. I cried. He held me. The next week I sold my grandmother's gold bracelet and told myself it was practical. I didn't know I was financing another woman's life while mourning the one I never got to build. After the hospital finally admitted my mother into surgery with only a partial payment, I sat in the waiting room and went through every transaction for the last 18 months. The pattern was too clean to be random. Money would leave our shared checking. More would leave my savings. Then it would land in the hidden account and get spent on an entire life I had never seen. A life with rent due on the first, ballet tuition on Thursdays, and monthly payments to a pediatric neurologist. Pediatric neurologist. I looked at that charge until my chest started to hurt. At 2 in the morning, while my mother was still in recovery, I drove home to find proof that would explain all of it. Daniel wasn't there. He'd texted once, still at work. We'll talk tomorrow. And then nothing. The house smelled like his cologne and the rosemary chicken I had meal prepped on Sunday, like normal life, refusing to admit it had died. I opened the desk in our bedroom first. Tax returns. Warranty papers. Batteries. Then the bottom drawer, the one he said was all boring work junk. Tucked beneath a folder of utility bills was a small brass key attached to a plastic tag with a post office box number. Under that was a receipt for a children's clothing store on the other side of town. Pink rain boots. Hair ribbons. Size 4T. We had no children. And then everything changed. I searched his car next. In the glove compartment behind expired insurance cards, I found a folded sheet of paper covered in marker hearts and lopsided stars. In the middle was a drawing of 3 people holding hands. A tall man, a woman in a yellow dress, and a little girl with curls. Above them, in shaky letters, it said, "Hi family." On the back, in adult handwriting, were 2 words, "Love, Nora." I sat in the driver's seat and pressed the paper to my mouth so the sound that came out of me wouldn't wake the neighbors. By sunrise, my mother was stable and I was no longer confused. Confusion is a luxury you lose once details start matching. There was a child. There was a woman named Claire. There was money, my money paying for them. Daniel had built something somewhere else, carefully enough to hide it, casually enough to survive dinner across from me every night. But I still needed facts. Rage without proof is just grief wearing boots. So when the bank opened, I was already in the parking lot. The branch manager, a tired-eyed woman named Denise, brought me into her office after I showed her the linked account on my app. She clicked through screens, frowned, and then looked at me the way the nurse had looked at me. "This account was opened 18 months ago," she said. "Your husband is the primary holder. You're listed as a connected source account through shared authorization." "I never authorized this." She turned the monitor slightly. There was my name on the e-signature line. Slanted, neat, and almost right. Almost. Daniel had seen my signature on every tax form, every insurance claim, every school volunteer sheet for my nieces. He had copied it well enough to pass through a digital system. "I can dispute it," Denise said carefully. "But if funds were transferred gradually and the household had joint access, it gets complicated. You'll need fraud review." My mouth went dry. "Can you freeze it?" "Not today." That answer nearly broke me more than the theft itself. I walked out of the bank and sat in my car gripping the steering wheel until my fingers ached. Across the street, people were buying coffee, laughing, living inside small predictable mornings. Meanwhile, I was realizing that every "we need to wait" conversation I'd had with my husband had probably happened right after he moved another piece of my life into someone else's. Then a memory hit me so hard I bent forward in the seat. 3 months earlier, the roof had started leaking over the guest room. I wanted to fix it before the storm season got worse. Daniel had sighed, opened our spreadsheet and said, "You know we're stretched. Unless you want us borrowing at crazy rates, this has to wait." That same week, the hidden account had paid for a bedroom set, a weekend resort booking, and a children's museum membership. I had put buckets under the leak while he bought another little girl a better life. I didn't know what was coming next, and that was the most dangerous part. Daniel came home that night carrying tulips. He found me at the kitchen table with the drawing, the bank printout, and the receipt for rain boots laid neatly in front of me. For a second, all the color drained from his face. Then the expression disappeared so fast I almost doubted I'd seen it. "You went through my things?" he asked. I laughed because the alternative was throwing the vase at his head. "Who is Claire?" He set the flowers down slowly. "Why, Who is Nora? He pulled out the chair across from me and sat like we were discussing cable rates. This is not what you think. There is a hidden account attached to my name. It's not hidden. It's a reserve account. For what? Secret rent? Pediatric appointments? Hair bows. He exhaled hard through his nose, annoyed now that denial wasn't working. I've been helping someone. My hands went numb. Helping. Yes. Helping. Because not everything is black and white. I stared at him. You took our money. I moved money. You forged my signature. You're overreacting. That word. Overreacting. Men like Daniel keep that word in their pocket for emergencies. He leaned back and crossed his arms. Claire is someone I've known for a long time. She had a difficult situation. I stepped in. With my father's settlement money? With household funds, he snapped. I'm part of this household too. You're funding a child. He looked away for the first time. That tiny movement told me more than any confession could. I whispered, is she yours? He didn't answer. But that silence answered everything. I thought screaming would help, but betrayal is stranger than that. It makes you calm in the most terrifying ways. My voice dropped. My breathing slowed. It was like my body understood before I did that I was sitting across from a man I no longer knew. You let me cancel treatment, I said. You let me sell my bracelet. You watched me beg spreadsheets for room to try again. His jaw tightened. We couldn't afford another cycle. Apparently we could afford ballet. His eyes flashed then mean and sudden. Don't do that. Do what? Make this uglier than it already is. I almost admired the nerve it took to say that in my kitchen. He stood up and grabbed his keys. Your mother's surgery has everyone emotional. We should talk when you're calmer. I followed him to the front door. If you leave right now, don't come back. He opened the door. You need me more than you think. Then he left. I stood there listening to his car pull away, and for the first time in 8 years, fear shifted into something sharper. Not strength yet. Strength takes time. This was closer to humiliation finally burning hot enough to become useful. The next morning I did something I never imagined myself doing. I followed my husband. He left our house at 8:12, wearing the blue shirt I bought him for our anniversary. He drove downtown first, parked outside the office he claimed to spend all his time in, stayed 16 minutes, then got back in his car. From there he crossed the river and drove into a neighborhood of renovated brick apartments and tiny tree-lined streets where people walked dogs in expensive sweaters. He pulled up outside a pale green apartment building with flower boxes under the windows. He didn't knock. He let himself in. I parked across the street and told myself I was only there for proof, not pain. Then the second floor curtain moved. Daniel appeared in the window with a little girl hanging off his neck. She couldn't have been older than 4. Dark curls. Pink socks. The kind of wild Grin children wear when the person they love most has just walked in. She kissed his cheek. He laughed. A woman came into frame behind them, blonde hair twisted up, oversized sweatshirt, easy smile. Daniel turned and kissed her too. Not hurried. Not guilty. Familiar. Home familiar. I forgot how to breathe. What I saw next shocked me even more. The woman lifted the child onto the counter while Daniel unpacked grocery bags like he had done it 100 times. Applesauce pouches. Cereal. A tiny carton of strawberries. Then he reached into one bag and pulled out a stuffed rabbit. The little girl clapped. The woman wrapped an arm around his waist and rested her head against his shoulder while he smiled at them both. That was the smile he used to bring me coffee with on Sundays. I don't remember driving away. I only remember ending up in the parking lot of a closed pharmacy and throwing up beside my car. When I got back to the hospital, my mother was awake but groggy. She looked so small against the white sheets that I had to lock everything down before I walked in. You do not bring a husband's betrayal into your mother's recovery room. You smooth your face. You fix the blanket. You ask if she needs ice chips. That's what daughters do. But my mother had raised me too well to miss the truth in my eyes. What happened? She whispered. I pulled my chair closer and took her hand. It was warm, fragile, real. Daniel's been lying to me. He watched me for a long time. Then she squeezed once and said, then stop helping him do it. That sentence carried me for the next week. I stopped calling him. I changed the locks while he was at work, or at least while he said he was. I opened a new checking account in my name only and had my pay moved there. I sent every screenshot, every receipt, every statement to a new email address he didn't know about. I slept in 2-hour pieces. I smiled through conversations with doctors. I answered my mother's questions without details because the last thing she needed was stress. And every night when the house got too quiet, I looked at the drawing from the glove compartment and reminded myself that denial was no longer an option. Still, the more I dug, the worse it got. The hidden account wasn't just covering rent and groceries. It paid for furniture delivery to the Grin apartment, monthly contributions to a daycare, specialty medication, a family photographer, a weekend trip to the coast. There were even charges at a jewelry store from the month Daniel told me he'd had to cancel my birthday dinner because a client crisis came up. That night he bought another woman earrings and came home to tell me he was exhausted. And just when I thought I understood the full shape of the betrayal, the doorbell rang. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, holding a casserole dish and a folded hospital blanket my mother had accidentally sent home in my overnight bag. She was 70 if she was a day, with silver hair pinned up in a clip and a stare that could peel paint. She took one look at my face and walked straight in without asking. "You look like you've been dragged behind a truck," she said. I laughed and then I cried so hard I had to sit on the floor. I didn't tell her everything. I told her enough. Another woman. Missing money. A child. Lice. Mrs. Alvarez listened without interrupting, then set the casserole on the counter like we were discussing weather. "Listen to me," she said. "Shame belongs to the one who betrayed, not the one betrayed. If you carry his shame, he gets to travel light." It was such a brutal, beautiful thing to say that I wrote it down later on a receipt. Then she added, "And don't go to that woman unless you're ready to hear something that hurts." I should have listened to the warning. But that wasn't the end of it. Not even close. 3 days later, while my mother slept through physical therapy and Daniel sent me a text that just said, "Can we be adults about this?" I drove back to the Grin apartment. I had no real plan. Anger rarely comes with a map. I only knew I could no longer stand outside my own life looking in through glass. I needed to hear the woman's voice. I needed to know whether she knew about me. I needed to know if she had laughed about me while buying strawberries with my money. I knocked once. Then again. The door opened a few inches, chain still latched. Up close, Claire looked younger than I expected. Maybe 29. Maybe 30. Tired eyes. No makeup. A small burn mark on her wrist. Not glamorous. Not cartoon villain pretty. Just human enough to make hating her immediately inconvenient. "Yes," she asked. I swallowed. "Are you Claire?" Her expression shifted. Guarded, uncertain. "Who's asking?" "My name is Maya." I let the silence do the rest. "I'm Daniel's wife." The color drained from her face so fast she had to grip the door. For one stupid second I thought she was acting. Then she whispered, "No. Not denial. Her." She shut the door, unlatched the chain and opened it again with trembling hands. Behind her, the apartment looked exactly like the life I had seen through the window. Soft blanket on the couch, half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, a pair of tiny shoes by the rug. A little girl's voice floated from another room, singing to herself. Claire took one step back. "You need to come inside." And then everything changed again. We sat across from each other at a table that I had probably paid for. Claire kept shaking her head like if she did it long enough, the truth would rearrange itself into something survivable. Nora was down the hall watching cartoons, unaware that 2 women were quietly discovering the same man had split both their lives open. "He told me he was separated," Claire said. Her voice kept catching. "He said the marriage had been over for years. He said you stayed tied because of property and your mother's health." I laughed without humor. "That's interesting because I've been married the whole time." She covered her mouth. Tears spilled into her palm. Oh my God. I wanted to despise her. It would have been cleaner. But pain recognizes pain faster than pride does. "How long?" I asked. She stared at the table. "For years. For years. Long enough to build routines. Long enough to create a child's idea of family. Long enough for my entire marriage to become background noise in someone else's love story." "Nora?" I asked. Claire looked toward the hallway, then back at me. "She's 3. My throat closed. That timing mattered. 3 years earlier was when Daniel had sat beside me in a fertility clinic parking lot and told me we had to stop trying for a while because our finances were getting too unstable. 3 years earlier was when he had cried with me in the car and promised it was only temporary. 3 years earlier, while I was grieving the family we couldn't afford, he had already started another one. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. Claire flinched, and I hated him for that too, for making fear the first language between us. I didn't know, she said quickly. I swear to you I didn't know. I believed her before I wanted to. What I saw next made the whole thing even crueler. Claire went to a drawer and brought back a photo strip from one of those mall booths. 4 frames. In the first, Daniel was kissing her cheek while she laughed. In the second, she held a tiny ultrasound print. In the third, his hand was over her stomach. In the fourth, they were both crying. The date was stamped in the corner. It was the same day as my second miscarriage. I knew because I still had the hospital bracelet in a memory box. For a second, the room tilted. Claire noticed and reached for me instinctively, then stopped herself halfway, both of us remembering who we were to each other and what had just been done to us. He told me he was at a conference that weekend, I said. She closed her eyes. He told me he had a business retreat. We both laughed then, but it came out broken. Nora padded into the kitchen in footy pajamas, hugging the stuffed rabbit I had seen him bring. She looked at me with sleepy curiosity. Mama, who's that? Claire pulled her close. A friend. Friend. I nearly choked on the word. But the little girl leaned into her mother's side so trustingly that all my rage had nowhere decent to go. Children don't create these disasters. They inherit them. Nora pointed to a photo on the fridge. That's Daddy at the beach. Claire ripped it down before I could look closer. I should have left then. I should have protected whatever was left of my heart. Instead, I sat back down because the truth had moved from ugly to monstrous, and half-truths were no longer enough. What else has he told you? I asked. Claire wiped her face. That he was going to finalize everything soon. That once some financial mess was done, we'd move into a bigger place. He said he was setting money aside for Nora's school and medical bills. What medical bills? She hesitated. Nora has a seizure disorder. It's controlled now, but the specialist is expensive. There was the pediatric neurologist. The money I couldn't find was buying medication that kept another woman's child safe. And somehow that made the betrayal more complicated, not less. But that still wasn't the worst truth waiting for me. I went home with a flash drive Claire had given me. I don't know what's on all of it, she said at the door. Some statements. Some photos. He used my laptop sometimes. That night, after my mother finally fell asleep in the hospital and the house was still enough for dread to breathe, I opened the files. Leases. Utility accounts. Insurance forms. Copies of Daniel's driver's license. Photos of birthdays, Christmas mornings, a pumpkin patch. He was in all of them. Not passing through. Not helping. Belonging. Then I opened a folder labeled Future, and my stomach dropped. There were mortgage pre-approval emails for a larger house. School applications. Budgets for a wedding. And attached to one financing packet was a document with my forged signature authorizing a home equity line against the house I shared with him. He hadn't just stolen what we had in cash. He had borrowed against my future. I called the lender the next morning from the hospital stairwell. After 43 minutes on hold, a man with a flat voice confirmed that a line of credit had been opened 6 months earlier. $40,000. My knees actually buckled and I had to sit on the stairs. When Daniel finally responded to my messages, it was just one sentence. You should be careful about making trouble when your mother depends on stability. I read that text 5 times and something inside me hardened permanently. It wasn't just deceit anymore. It was threat. I forwarded the text to myself, then to Claire. Her reply came almost instantly. He told me you were unstable. Of course he had. That afternoon, Daniel showed up at the hospital in a pressed shirt carrying a fruit basket, like a man auditioning for the role of concerned husband. I saw him through the hallway window before he saw me. He stopped to greet a nurse, smiled sadly, adjusted the basket handle. If evil wore horns, we'd all be safer. Instead it wears polished shoes and knows how to lower its voice in hospitals. I intercepted him before he could reach my mother's room. You don't get to walk in there, I said. He lowered his voice. Not here. Perfect place actually. You seem to do your worst work in places where people are helpless. He glanced around, annoyed. You're embarrassing yourself. No, Daniel. I'm introducing you to consequences. His eyes chilled. You have no idea how much damage you can do if you start dragging other people into this. I stepped closer. I already met Claire. For the first time, real panic flashed across his face. That was useful. He recovered fast. You're spiraling. She knows I'm your wife. He gripped the fruit basket so tightly the plastic wrap crackled. Maya, listen carefully. Adult lives are complicated. You can either handle this privately, or you can make a mess that hurts everyone. Everyone. I said. You mean the wife whose name you forged, the girlfriend you lied to, or the child you built on stolen money? His jaw flexed. Then he said the one thing I will never forget. I did what I had to do. Just like that. No apology. No crack in the voice. No shame. And I knew then I was no longer dealing with a guilty man. I was dealing with a man who thought need gave him permission. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew I couldn't fight him by crying harder. Claire called me that night after Nora was asleep. I found something else, she whispered. He left a folder here by accident. I think you need to see it in person. I drove over immediately. She had spread the papers across the same kitchen table. Mixed in with bank statements and loan records were printed emails from my fertility clinic. At first I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw my own name in the subject line and Daniel's personal email in the reply chain. My embryo transfer appointment from 3 years earlier had not been postponed because of finances. It had been cancelled. By Daniel. He had written to the clinic pretending to speak on my behalf, saying we had chosen to discontinue treatment and release the remaining funds back to our family account. 2 days later, that same amount appeared in the hidden account. 1 week after that, there was a receipt for Claire's apartment security deposit and Nora's prenatal care. For a long time neither of us spoke. Then I heard myself make a sound I had never made before. Not crying. Not anger. Something lower. Animal. A grief so sharp it didn't fit inside language. Claire covered her mouth and started sobbing. I didn't know, she kept saying. Maya, I swear I didn't know. I believed her. That was the unbearable part. Daniel hadn't simply chosen another life. He had stolen mine to pay for it. And that was the moment the story stopped being about infidelity. It became about erasure. The next few days moved like a storm. Claire left the Grin apartment with Nora and stayed with her sister. I met with a fraud attorney recommended by Denise from the bank. The attorney, a severe woman named Rita Collins, read through the documents in total silence and finally said, he made one mistake. Men like this always do. He put too much of it in writing. Rita filed emergency fraud notices with the bank and lender. Claire gave a statement. Denise flagged the hidden account for internal review. Mrs. Alvarez came over every evening with soup, legal pads and fresh rage. My mother, now back home and slowly walking with a cane, watched me from her recliner one night and said, you look different. I am different, I said. She nodded once. Good. But Daniel was still Daniel. Cornered men don't become honest. They become dangerous. He started calling from unknown numbers. He emailed me through an old shared account saying I was ruining Nora's life out of jealousy. He left a voicemail at 2 in the morning saying, if you keep pushing, nobody wins. Then he had the nerve to message Claire that I was manipulating her because I couldn't accept reality. Reality. As if he hadn't manufactured it with forged signatures and stolen choices. Then just when I thought I had seen the full depth of his cruelty, Claire called with one more piece of the truth. What I found next made me shake so hard I had to sit down, she said. She had gone back to the Grin apartment with a police escort to collect the rest of Nora's things. Hidden inside a lockbox in Daniel's closet were printed notes from a conversation with one of his business associates. Budget projections. Debt planning. Personal comments scribbled in the margins. Next to my name he had written, Maya won't fight. Too guilty about her mom. Too desperate for family to leave. Claire brought me the page herself. I stared at those words until the letters blurred. It wasn't just that he had lied to me. He had studied me. He had mapped my love, my grief, my loyalty and used every part like a tool. He knew exactly which wound to press to keep me compliant. He knew I would sacrifice for my mother, hold on after miscarriages, and work twice as hard when he said money was tight. He had not merely betrayed my trust. He had built a business model on it. And that is when fear finally died. In its place came clarity. Rita called the next morning. His firm is hosting a client appreciation dinner Friday night. Public event. Donors, partners, investors. So he'll show up polished, confident, visible. People like him hate losing control in private. But in public, that's where their mask becomes evidence. Claire was silent on the speakerphone. Then she said, I want to be there. I looked at the forged clinic email again at the date of the appointment I had cried over for years and answered, so do I. The plan came together fast. Rita had already alerted the bank's legal department and the lender's fraud division. Denise had confirmed the signature mismatch through internal review. Claire had copies of the lease payments and the future folder. I had the clinic emails, the threatening text, the account transfers, and the drawing from Nora's hand if anyone dared suggest this was a one-time lapse in judgment. On Friday night, I put on a dark blue dress I hadn't worn since my cousin's wedding and looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't dressing to keep peace. I was dressing to end a lie. But that wasn't even the hardest part. The hardest part was seeing Claire in the hotel lobby 20 minutes before the dinner began. She wore a plain black dress and no jewelry, her face pale but steady. We stood there for a second, two women joined by the same wound in different places. There was no dramatic embrace, no instant sisterhood. Real life is rougher than that. She looked at me and said, whatever happens, I'm sorry for every day I didn't know. I answered honestly, I'm sorry too. Then we walked in together. The ballroom glittered with money. White tablecloths. Soft music. Crystal glasses. Men laughing with one hand on each other's shoulders like none of them had ever lied to a woman in their lives. Daniel was near the stage, charming a group of older donors with that same measured warmth that used to make my mother trust him. He saw me first. Then Claire. Then Rita behind us. His smile didn't disappear immediately. It cracked in stages. I almost enjoyed that. He excused himself from the group and came toward us fast, keeping his voice low through clenched teeth. What are you doing here? I held his gaze. Telling the truth. He looked at Claire. You brought her here? Claire's face changed then. Not soft, not frightened. Finished. No, Daniel. You did. Rita stepped forward and handed him a sealed envelope. You've been formally notified of fraud claims, disputed authorizations and pending civil action. The bank and lender have copies. So does your firm's compliance office. His eyes flicked to the logo on the envelope, then to the room around us. This is insane, he hissed. Maya, stop this now. No. You're emotional. No. You don't understand the whole story. Then tell it, I said. People were starting to notice. Conversations thinned. Glasses lowered. One of his partners moved closer, confusion already hardening into concern. Daniel forced a smile and tried one last time to regain the room. My wife is under a lot of stress. Her mother's been ill and... Claire cut across him. And you told me she was unstable so I'd never ask questions. Silence spread outward from us like spilled ink. Daniel looked at her with pure hatred then, the kind men save for women who stop being useful. His partner, a gray-haired man named Leonard, frowned. Daniel, what is this? I answered before he could. It's forged signatures, I said clearly. It's a hidden account funded with my savings. It's a home equity line opened without my consent. It's him canceling my fertility treatment behind my back and using the money to pay for another household. The room went so quiet I could hear the ice settling in a glass 2 tables away. Daniel laughed, but it came out brittle. This is absurd. I pulled the clinic email from my bag and handed it to Leonard. Claire gave him the lease records. Rita passed over the bank review summary. Denise, who had agreed to attend on behalf of the bank once internal clearance came through, stepped forward from the back of the room where I hadn't even noticed her arrive. It's not absurd, she said. It's documented. And then everything collapsed. Daniel lunged for the papers. Leonard pulled back. 2 more people from compliance came in from the side entrance with security. Daniel started talking faster, louder, too many words at once. I was trying to help them. Maya never understood pressure. Claire needed support. Those funds were marital assets. I heard myself ask the question I had been carrying since the hospital hallway. Why? He stopped. The entire ballroom held its breath. And in front of all those people stripped of charm and time and excuses, Daniel finally told the truth. Because I was tired, he said. His voice was flat now, ugly. I was tired of grief. Tired of hospitals. Tired of treatments that went nowhere. Tired of every room in that house feeling sad. Claire was easy. Nor was Joy. I wanted one part of my life that didn't feel broken. The words hit like open-handed slaps. He kept going. You were always carrying something, he said to me. Your father, your mother, the miscarriages, the money. Everything with you was heavy. I just wanted peace. For a second nobody moved. Then Claire whispered, horrified, You call this peace? I thought I would shatter hearing it. Instead I felt something stranger. Relief. Because there it was. The full ugliness. Not hidden. Not softened. Not dressed up as help or confusion or complicated adult circumstances. He had looked at my pain and decided it made me easier to rob. He had looked at another woman's dependence and decided it made her easier to own. He had called that peace. I stepped closer and spoke so only he in the first row could hear. You didn't want peace, Daniel. You wanted women too exhausted to notice you were a thief. His face changed. Rage, humiliation, exposure. Security moved in then along with one of the compliance officers. Leonard looked sick. This event is over for you, he said. Daniel tried to pull away. You can't do this. Rita answered, Watch us. The next minutes blurred into camera flashes, whispers, the scrape of chairs. Someone had already called the police because fraud tied to financial services moves faster when rich people are nearby. Daniel kept looking at me like I might still save him if he said the right thing. I didn't. That was the turning point. Not the ballroom. Not the documents. Not even his confession. It was the moment he realized I was done translating his cruelty into misunderstanding. By the time he was escorted out through the side hall, he had lost his job, his performance award, the illusion of control, and the audience he performed goodness for. He twisted once to look back at me and said, You're destroying everything. I answered, No. I'm just the first person who stopped helping you build it. The sound that came out of Claire then was half sob, half laugh. I will remember it forever. The months after were not magically easy. Justice in real life is paperwork, waiting rooms, signatures, court dates, and learning how to unclench your jaw when the phone rings. Some of the money was recovered quickly after the fraud claims froze key accounts. Some took longer. The home equity line was reversed after forensic review confirmed the signature fraud. Daniel's firm cooperated once they realized how much exposure they faced. Criminal charges were filed. Civil action followed. He texted apologies through lawyers eventually. Long ones. Tearful ones. Strategic ones. I never answered. My mother recovered slowly, stubborn as ever. One afternoon while I was helping her practice steps on the back porch, she paused, leaned on her cane, and looked at the fig tree Daniel had always promised to trim. Funny, she said. It looks healthier now that the dead branches are gone. I laughed so hard I cried. Claire and I did not become best friends in a movie-perfect way. That would have been too neat for what we survived. But we did become something honest. She got a job at a dental office. She moved into a smaller place near her sister. Nora still needed treatment, and this time the bills were paid by grants, work, and people who told the truth about what help actually meant. Once, months later, Claire asked if I wanted to see a photo from Nora's school recital. I braced for pain. Instead I felt something gentler. The child smiled in a paper crown, entirely innocent, entirely separate from the man who had tried to use her existence as a shield. She looks happy, I said. She is, Claire answered. For the first time, so am I. As for me, I sold the house. Not because Daniel had poisoned it, though he tried. I sold it because I no longer wanted to spend another year inside walls built around survival. I used part of the recovered money to set my mother up in a one-story duplex with a sunny kitchen and grab bars exactly where she needed them. I put the rest in an account with only my name on it. The first time I signed that paperwork, my hand shook. The second time it didn't. I didn't rush back into dreams just because I had escaped a nightmare. Healing is not a race towards some shiny version of yourself. It is quieter than that. It is learning to trust your own confusion when something feels off. It is opening mail without fear. It is laughing in a grocery store because you suddenly realize no one is lying to you about strawberries. It is sleeping through the night and understanding that peace does not require your blindness. For years I thought love meant endurance. I thought if I loved hard enough, waited long enough, forgave deeply enough, honesty would eventually bloom in the spaces I protected. I was wrong. Love without truth is just a slow theft. And if there's one thing I want you to remember from my story, it is this. Betrayal rarely arrives looking like a monster. It arrives looking like the person you have already explained away too many times. It uses your loyalty as camouflage, counts on your exhaustion. It hopes you'll call your own instincts cruelty so it can keep eating in peace. But one day, if you're lucky, the numbers stop adding up. A card gets declined. A hidden account appears. A lie slips in the light. And the same heart that once begged to keep a love alive becomes the heart that finally buries it. The night I discovered that hidden account, I thought I was losing everything. I wasn't. I was finding the exact price of my silence. And once I knew it, I never paid it again.